welcome to day 9 of Shadowhunters month, and today I'm going to be talking about an aspect of Shadowhunters as a whole. You know, it applies to the movie, it applies to the books, it applies to the show, and it's very much one of the most kind of recognisable things about the series, and an intrinsic kind of part of Shadowhunters as a whole, and that is of course runes or marks, however you want to call them. And I kind of came about the idea for this video from this, which is the Shadowhunters Codex book. So it's basically like they just wrote like the textbook that Shadowhunters would use to study with. And yeah, there's some extra stuff in there as well, which is really cool, but that's for another video. There's just like a couple of pages throughout this that like just show a lot of the different runes that there are. And I was flicking through them and thinking, oh, some of these are really cool actually. And then the idea for this came to mind, where I thought maybe I could just pick out some of my favourite runes and talk about them a bit. Just, you know, something a bit different to talk about. And I've said ever since I kind of fell in love with, you know, all of the Shadowhunters kind of stuff, I've always said throughout most of my life that I'd never get a tattoo, and I probably never will. But if I were to get one, it would definitely be a rune. I just think it's cool that they basically literally are tattoos as well, in the Shadowverse. So I've always found that kind of interesting, because you get a tattoo of like a character you love or some song lyrics or something, but you're getting a tattoo of a tattoo, if that makes sense. I've always found that kind of really funny. But yeah, basically, I just went online to do a bit of research on it, and I flicked through that book, and I've picked out a few of my favourite runes, and just kind of giving a few reasons why I enjoyed them so much, be it what they represent, or sometimes it's as simple as what they look like. So yeah, I've chosen 6 to just quickly go through, so let's get on to the first one. So the first one of my favourite runes, this isn't so much a countdown, I've just kind of listed my favourites in no particular order, but the first one is the Angelic Power rune, which is probably the most recognisable rune of them all, and it's often used as like the logo for Shadowhunters. You know, the show, the movie, I think they all kind of used the Angelic Power rune as kind of the logo or the symbol that kind of represents the entirety of Shadowhunters, which is kind of why it's one of my personal favourites, because it's a simple design and but it looks really cool anyway, but it's also kind of the first rune I ever saw in terms of Shadowhunters. And you know, if your favourite characters are actual Shadowhunters, then they're going to be having this rune on them, and you know, Izzy has it across her chest, and Jace has it, I think, somewhere there. And it just looks really cool, and I've always liked kind of what it does and what it represents, you know, powering like seraph blades and stopping demons from kind of healing, you know, properly kill them. So it's very handy. It's a handy one to have. And it's kind of like the standard one that all Shadowhunters kind of always have. So yeah, I think it looks cool, and it is like cool in terms of what abilities it has, but it really is one of my personal favourites for me, probably for sentimental value, just because it was kind of the first rune I ever really saw, and it is very much linked with the DNA of what Shadowhunters is, and you know, if you see any kind of Shadowhunters marketing, you'll probably see the Angelic Power rune. So I imagine this means a lot to a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of like tattoos of this particular rune around, so I think it is a fairly popular one, for obvious reasons. So yeah, the Angelic Power rune is definitely one of my favourites. So another one of my favourite runes is the Parabatai rune. I believe it's also known as the Friendship rune, because when I was kind of looking these up, I get in like the same images for both. So I'm assuming they're kind of the same thing. There might be a few kind of subtle differences, but the general shape for sure is the same. And for me, while you know, it looks cool enough. Again, it's kind of what it represents for me, is why I love this rune so much. Because I love the idea of having a parabatai. It was one of the key things that really struck me when I first started like getting into Shadowhunters, and I just really loved the idea of it, and having this kind of bond with someone, and drawing off each other's power and feeling what each other are feeling, and going through like this agonising pain if one of them were to die, but dedicating yourself to another person for life, because obviously you can only ever choose one parabatai. You can only do the ceremony once, and you know you only have until you're like 18 or something to actually get a parabatai. It's kind of like, in a weird way, choosing your GCSEs, or choosing your A levels, or choosing what you're going to study at uni or whatever, college, kind of determining the rest of your life before you've even really lived a lot of it. It's kind of similar to choosing a parabatai, but I love the idea of like having this really deep personal connection with someone, like this partner through thick and thin that you can fight with, and feel their pain and kind of become stronger together as like absolute unit. And yeah, I just always kind of loved the idea of a parabatai and what it means, and it's this really kind of special idea and this really special relationship, and you know, it's held with very wide regard, I think, throughout all of the Shadowverse, because you know not everyone has a parabatai, so it's this really special but really important thing, and it's an aspect of like the lore of Shadowhunters that I really love. So that's why I have this, I suppose, awe and just this love and admiration for the parabatai rune. So another one of my favourite runes is the Bind to rune, and one of the reasons I like this is because I like Lord of the Rings, and the way it's like the font, I suppose, if you will, of this particular rune looks like very Lord of the Rings-esque writing, and looks like the writing on the side of like the One Ring, which I just always found intriguing. But this is also kind of the one and the rune that Clary kind of came up with. Like this big battle that could join Shadowhunters and Downworlders alike together for a brief period of time. And I loved that story point of the Shadowhunters and the Downworlders kind of coming together to fight a common enemy. That sense of unity after, you know, a lot of kind of racism against Downworlders, if you will. And lots of kind of morality complexes and inferiority complexes. And there's so many kind of divides between the Shadowhunter world and the Downworld. So seeing them come together was a really amazing thing as a reader. And that whole kind of plot element is symbolised by Clary's Bind to rune. So not only is it awesome because Clary invented this rune, which showcases her awesome powers and stuff, but it's also a very hopeful rune, and that's something I always really liked about it. And again, because I'm an absolute nerd, the Lord of the Rings-esque kind of writing really helps sell it for me. So another rune I really like is the Destined rune, and I couldn't find a really good picture of it on its own, so I've had to kind of find a different image to use for the video. So it's the one on the right. I'm sure you can tell because you can read. I mean, what's the other one? Creation. The Creation one's pretty cool as well, but I'm talking about the Destined one. I just like its very kind of simple design. I mean, it's not my favourite design-wise. It's more, again, what it stands for, and I've always liked the idea of destiny and fate and all that. I kind of like to believe in it, even though it probably isn't really a thing, like destiny and all that, things are meant to happen, whatever. I love the idea of believing in that, and it's kind of a very uplifting and hopeful thought to have, like, destiny. Everything is destined and determined, written in the stars, and that's completely what this rune represents. And I think destiny and fate is kind of a really big theme throughout all of Shadowhunters as well. So it makes sense that there is a rune for, destined. So with all that in mind, that's why this rune, even if it's not the most extravagant looking one, it really does speak to me on a personal level. So another rune I really, really like is the Endurance rune. This isn't so much one I can really analyse and dig deep into, so I couldn't find a whole lot of information on it anyway, but also this is one of the ones that I really like just because I think it looks really cool. I really like the design of it. So that's the main reason. I just think it looks really badass. And honestly, if I was going to prioritise runes that I would have, I think Endurance would be very high on the list for me personally. Got to endure those YouTube comments somehow. So yeah, I just think personally this is one I'm very much drawn to in terms of one I would have, but also I think it just looks badass. There are a lot of runes that I really, really like, and I'm really interested in and intrigued by, but I kind of narrowed this video down to just having 6, so I don't talk for too long. So the 6th and final one I'm going to talk about is the Remembrance and Mourning rune. This one I think looks really cool, and in terms of relating it to Shadowhunters, I think the idea of remembrance and mourning is a very big theme in Shadowhunters because death is such a big theme, and having the idea of ghosts in Shadowhunters world, and we lose a lot of characters, and we see that loads of people kind of mourn and cope with this loss, and as we kind of saw in the show as well, there's this really beautiful ceremony for remembering and mourning people we've lost, when these particles of light come out of the bodies and stuff and fly up to heaven, if you will. And I thought that was always a really beautiful kind of thing, the way they treat death. They have those final words, hail and farewell, things like that. It always hits me in the feels when someone says hail and farewell forever. It's like when Clary scatters Jonathan's ashes at the end of City of Heavenly Fire, and even after everything that he put her through, she kind of understands that he wasn't, destined to be such an evil person, and she's just like, hail and farewell forever, my brother, and I'm like, feels. So I've always loved the way Shadowhunters have kind of dealt with death, and how they handle the mourning and grieving and remembrance process. So I really like that, and again, I'm very sentimental, I'm very nostalgic, that's just who I am. And unfortunately I've had to deal with a lot of loss in the past couple of years. I have lost quite a few family members, and beyond, in the past few years, and lost them in ways outside of death, but also kind of lost myself along the way a bit, so it's kind of all that kind of remembrance and mourning, all those people. So this rune kind of really speaks to me on that level, because it's one I relate to very strongly, having lived through what I've lived through the past couple of years. And I think you could often learn a lot through the way Shadowhunters kind of grieve and mourn and celebrate the lives of people they've lost. And it's a very kind of helpful for me to see how they kind of deal with grief and how they say goodbye to the dead. And all of that pain and loss and suffering that people go through becomes this really beautiful kind of rune and this really beautiful little image, and this memorial to people that are no longer with us. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing and such a nice way of going about losing someone, turning it into something as beautiful as the Remembrance and Mourning rune. So that's why it speaks to me. I just think it's a really, really beautiful rune, and that's why it's one of my favourites. So those were just 6 of many, many runes and marks that I really, really love in all of Shadowhunters. So yeah, let me know what some of your favourite runes are. I feel like Angelic Power is a very common one. But if you don't like it, let me know. Let me know if there are any you don't like. That'd be interesting, actually. But also like as well. Let's keep things positive. So yeah, those are a few of my favourite runes. Let me know some of yours, and until tomorrow, thanks for watching.